Well, thank you guys for coming. We're going to talk about test prep today and test taking. We're going to start with a poem called Last Night. Last night I knew the answers. Last night I had them packed. Last night I could have told you every answer just like that. Last night my brain was cooking. Last night I got them right. Last night I was a genius. So where were you last night? You ever feel that way? You walk in to take a test and it's like, it all just left. I had it, but it all just left. So that's what we're going to talk about today, some test taking strategies. We're going to begin with a test anxiety questionnaire. So it's on your PowerPoint, but I also gave you a set of handouts, and so it is on the handouts also. So you've got a series of about 10 questions there. If you'll take just a moment to do those questions right now, please. And you're ranking these 1 to 5. I should have told you that. When you're finished, then add your points up. We're going to add your points if you've not done that, and we're going to interpret those. If you have a low score, like between 10 to 19, could be 5 to 19, that means you really don't suffer much from test anxiety. You have that under control. If your score is somewhere between 20 and 30, that indicates that you have some characteristics of anxiety, but it's probably an appropriate amount of stress, or maybe you just need someone to talk to. If you have a score over 30, then that says you're having a really unhealthy amount of test anxiety in your life. Try to identify the reasons why you have that anxiety. Is it I don't feel prepared? Is it that test just freaked me out? And then develop some kind of strategies, and obviously we're here to help you with that. So here are some of the symptoms of test anxiety. Seemed oh too familiar when I was reading these through. Fear of failing before you even look at it. You have tension in your body as the instructor is handing out the test. Your heart rate is beating faster. You might be perspiring. You might have shortness of breath. You have a negative mindset. I already know I'm going to fail this test. I'm so dumb I shouldn't even bother taking this. Why am I wasting my time? Blanking out. You get the test in front of you and it's just like written in a foreign language. But as you walk out or shortly after you've left, all the information comes flooding back into your mind. Like, I knew that, where was it? And then you're frustrated with your exam. Great, because you were prepared, you knew the information, it's just when you got in there, it left you. Can you guys relate to any of those signs or symptoms? And maybe you have anxiety when you take certain tests, but not when you take tests maybe in some other classes. Or is it everywhere? All right. So here's some things we can do to control our test anxiety. First of all, some anxiety is good. A little bit of anxiety makes you prepare a little bit better. Try to over-prepare, like know this information like the back of your hand, but don't over-prepare too much because then that causes stress in your life too. Try to become desensitized to the test environment and the format. So in other words, try not to freak out that you know that you're going to have this test. Don't let the environment mess with your mind. Develop and practice various kinds of tests and questions. How many of you do that? Design your own tests. Or think about what the test questions are going to be. I actually used to make up my own test thinking, this is what I think they're going to ask, and I would make up my own tests. So take practice tests if they're available. Take some practice tests. Often in your textbooks, there might be some review questions periodically throughout the chapters. If there are, take those, because those are the important things. Always turn to the end of the chapter, and if there's any kind of a review there, know those items. So change and stop negative thoughts. Because basically, if you go in saying, I can't do this, then you're right, you can't do this. But if you go in saying, I'm going to do my best and I'm going to do great, you probably are. So your thought process plays a lot into this. Prepare your body. In other words, make sure you got enough rest the night before. Make sure you ate some protein the morning of so that your cells are functioning at high performance levels. Breathing and relaxation exercises, both before the test and actually during, and we'll do some of those. You take control of the situation, and if you need help, if your anxiety is so high that you need to talk to somebody about, come see Jessie in our office. Okay. Some things you can do to reduce your test anxiety. I also gave you guys these. They're in your handout also. Prepare ahead of time. Cramming is no good. Cramming does not work. It just causes you more stress. And throughout this, we're going to talk about a good preparation schedule. We know, this is what research tells us. Read before you go to class so that you've got some general knowledge of the topic. Take notes while you're in there. Rewrite those notes at night. That's all in that day. Then the next day, reread your notes. And if you'll just reread them once a week between now and the time of that test, you probably will make a B. That's what research says. And it's because you're getting the information in your longer term memory. Whereas if you wait till the night before to pull everything out and try to cram it in, you're not making the connections. The neurons are not building on each other. So, okay, plenty of rest and sleep, which is hard to do when you're in college, but try. Eat something nutritious the day of the exam. Don't get there too early, because if you arrive too early, then that's kind of stressful. But also don't get there late, because then that's even more stressful. Avoid last-minute studying. You're already prepared. Avoid listening to what the other people in the classroom are saying about it, because if they've got some anxiety, it can start rubbing off on you like, well, I thought I was prepared, now I'm sitting here listening to them, and then you start to doubt yourself. So ignore what other people are saying, and then just try to relax. Okay, remember to breathe. Deep breaths, close your eyes. We'll do some relaxation in here. Close your eyes, change the thought process in your brain. Don't get bogged down and worry about questions that you don't know. Strategy we'll talk about. If you don't know one, put a little mark by it, a question mark, a dot, an X. Something that at a glance you can come back and say, oh yeah, I have to go back to that question. Because as you go through the test, you might get some clues that would help you to answer the one that you didn't know. And then reward yourself when you're done. Okay, so here's how we need to prepare for different types of tests. So if it's an exam study, and you have some handouts on this too, prepare a summary sheet for large amounts of text. So if it's a history class and you have just been exposed to lots and lots of data and dates and people and things like that, then make yourself a study sheet of what you deem to be the most important things. Spend several nights before the exam looking through your notes. So that goes back to look at it, just reread those notes because it's getting in your longer term memory. Stress these items when you're reviewing. Anything that the instructor emphasized in class, or maybe that was emphasized in the text. So it was italicized, it was bold, it was dotted. If it was bold or italicized or dotted, it's probably important. Any area that the professor has advised you to study for. And then any questions that you found in the study guide, or if you've had quizzes along the way, those questions are probably going to appear again, and then a review at the end of the textbook chapter. Those are all the things you would want to make sure that you're reviewing. Okay, here are 3 different kinds of tests. Again, I gave you a separate handout for this. So if it's an objective exam, study as though it is an essay, but stress your specifics. Know definitions of your key terms and examples, and a good thing is putting those on note cards so you can flip them over and study them. Make a list of items, maybe all the judicial department functions, what they can do. And then for true, false, write some false statements. So test yourself by making true statements false in your study. If it's an essay exam, then you want to talk about study content and stress the concepts within that content, like the 3 departments of the government and what they all do, or the major systems of the body and what they all do. List some probable questions, so again, what you think he or she is going to ask, and then make a good outline of the chapter. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but Cornell note studying, that's a technique where you fold the paper like this, and maybe your definitions or your list are here, and then the main topic is here. So it's a really good study guide because you can fold it this way or you can fold it back this way. And then if it's a problem exam, make sure you memorize formulas. So a math class, memorize your formulas. If you're not going to be allowed to use those formulas or have those formulas in front of you, then memorize them. And then practice different kind of problems that you've been working on. Okay? So you have this handout I gave you, and it's called the 5-day exam prep sheet. So you know you're having a test in a week. So here are the things that you can do the 5 days before. So we'll go through each day. All right, beginning on your 5-day countdown, on the 5th day, here's what you need to do. Get all your materials that you'll need to review. So if you have a textbook, notes, maybe the instructor's giving you a PowerPoint or a handout, all the materials, gather them all together. Schedule 3 20 to 30 minute review sessions per day, 5 days in advance. Why do you think it's 20 to 30 minutes? Why is it not an hour?
No, it's over here.
Yeah. It's our brains just don't like to comprehend an hour at a time. 20 to 30 minutes is when we're at our optimum, and then you need to get up and move around, drink some water, get that oxygen recirculated back. So schedule 3 20 to 30 minute review sessions. Plan the content of each review session. So today I'm going to study these parts. Tomorrow I'm going to study these parts. The next day I'm going to prep as for the essay portion because the test may have a little bit of everything on it. What materials you're going to cover, how long will you need to spend on each part, and what method are you going to use to review. And then mark it on your calendar. How many use calendars? Some of you? Okay, most of you do. Mark a calendar with your times, the activities, the subject matter that you're going to do during those times. So you're really getting your brain organized and setting up a systemic method for studying. All right, so day 5. Here's what you're going to do. Set the timer 20 to 30 minutes, and you're going to read. You're going to reread through all your notes, PowerPoint, whatever it is you have, those materials that you've collected already. You're going to take a 5 to 10 minute break between each study session, and that's all you're doing this day is you're just rereading everything you have. So day 5's reading. Day 4, now you're getting your textbook back out. Again, set your timer, 20 to 30 minutes, that's it. Make sure you take that break again. So now you're reviewing your textbook materials and do what's called a picture walk. You're just turning the pages. You're seeing the highlighted items, the bold items, any captions that are written underneath pictures, the review questions at the end of each section, review questions at the end of each chapter, and then any study guides that the teacher gave you, okay? So 5th day was read it, 4th day is now go back through your textbook and things like that. Day 3, you're going to work on vocabulary. Again, set your alarm clock, make sure you take your 5 to 10 minute break in between. Now you're looking at any vocabulary words that you had. Make a glossary on your little 3x5 note cards or sticky notes, whatever you use, with the vocabulary words that you think are really important that could be on this test. Try to recall the definition by looking at the word first. So you take the word, you try to give the definition first. Then later, take the definition and try to get the word because it's easier to do it that way. So if you get the other way in your brain first, that helps. Don't study the words in the same order. Mix your cards up because if you do them in the same order every time, they're not going to be in that order on the test. So, okay. Make sure you get the definition, that you can recall the term, that you know how to spell it, and that you can give an example of it. So day 3 is vocabulary. Day 2, lecture notes. So you're going to pull your notes back out. This is the handout that you see over here. This is what's called the Cornell. So you take a normal sheet of paper, you fold it in about 2.5 inches like this. On here, they call this the Q column, but basically that's your word. Over here is the definition or the 3 parts of or the steps describing it over here. It says leave 2 inches at the bottom for summarizing, okay? So again, you set your timer, make sure you have your breaks, and you're reviewing all of the notes and all of the handouts that you have. Then you can make an outline. You can do Cornell, but how many of you do mind mapping? You're more visual and you like to draw a mind map. So a mind map is like the main topics is in the middle and then the subtopics jut off of it. So some people like the note-taking format, you know, that goes linear, like 1, da-da-da, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Some people like that, but some people are more visual and they like the mind mapping. Do whatever works for you. So you can do a mind map, or this is called the Cornell note-taking because it was initiated at Cornell University. So day 2 is working on your lecture notes. Day 1 then is the problem area. So you determine for you, what's the problem area for you on this coming test that you think. Again, only 20 to 30 minutes. Make sure you give yourself your break. So now you're reviewing everything that you did on day 5, day 4, day 3, and day 2. So your lecture notes, your textbook notes, the instructor handouts, and vocabulary words. So this is kind of like the day before you're ready to go. Then the night before the test. You know this. Relax. You have studied this every possible way. And so have a good evening. Know that you're confident in what you're going to do tomorrow. And try to relax that night before. If you've studied for 5 days, you don't have to be studying the night before. Once you walk into the testing room, you have to take control of this situation. Don't feel like the test is in control of you. You be in control of that test. So first, make sure you listen closely for any directions that the instructor has given you. Look over the entire test first. Read carefully any directions. Follow them carefully and exactly. Look for the total number of questions. Make sure you've got all the pages. Ask for the time allotment, which is 50 minutes or an hour and 15, depending on how long, and then budget your time accordingly. So if there's 10 true false, 25 multiple choice, and 1 essay, you know what's going to be the easiest for you. Are you best at true false? Do you like multiple choice, or do you like essay best? Go do the thing that you know how to do. Now, I always like to, when I took tests, I would always do the dump on the essay question. I wouldn't necessarily do the essay question, but I'd read it and I'd jot down just the terms or the order or anything that I thought fit into that, and then I would go back and start the rest of the test. Some of you may want to do that essay part first. You have to do what fits best for you. Okay? But begin with what you know to build your confidence. Okay? If you come to a question that you don't know, again, put the question mark by it, put an X by it, put a little dot by it, something that at a glance you can go back then when you're reviewing and say, oh, I forgot that one, I forgot that one. Because, again, as you're going through the test, you're going to see some other question that's going to jog your memory on what you have forgotten. Know what the question asks before selecting the answer. Read that question all the way through. Sometimes we just read the beginning part of the question thinking, oh yeah, I know what that's asking. You go ahead and mark the answer, whereas if you read it all the way through, it was really asking for something else. If you notice what appears to be a typo, then ask about it, because maybe it is, because we teachers make mistakes, but maybe it's not, and something she will say will help jog your memory about something. Briefly scan text, figures, charts, or drawings. So if they gave you some additional information in the form of a chart, well, they didn't put that on there to be pretty. So there's something in that chart that you're supposed to be using to answer this question. Answer every question. A blank question is always wrong, right? You got 0 points if you leave it blank. Give it a shot. You never know. A guess might be right. Okay. I gave you this handout also in the back in your separate because I wanted you to know this. So there are 10 traps to study. So if you'll turn to that handout. Then we'll go a little more into depth. May I borrow this one back and I'll make sure I get you a copy. The first trap says, I don't know where to begin. Sometimes do we feel overwhelmed like that? There is so much information on this test that I don't know where to start at on it. Okay, what the suggestion is to break that down into manageable chunks then. You probably know the information is just overwhelming in your mind right now. So if you go back and you use the 5-day study guide and review this portion at a time, then that feeling of overwhelmness goes away. The second trap says, I've got too much to study in so little time. Would you all agree? You're very, very busy people, so you really do have little time. So they're recommending here, make sure before you even start discussion in that class on that next unit that you preview the materials. Make sure you've done a picture walk through the chapter, looking at the title headings, looking at any comments underneath pictures. And so if you do that in advance, then it takes less studying on the other end of it. Okay, number 3. This is so dry, I can't even stay awake. This material is so boring. So it says to tack it, get actively involved with it. Underline, how many highlighters do I have in here? Anybody here highlight information as you're going through, or you underline, or you star it? Yeah, as she's highlighting right now. Yeah. Take the time to discuss it with other people in your class study groups. How many of you utilize study groups, or you study with a partner? Right. Okay, so sometimes studying together kind of takes the dryness away from it. But stay on the offensive here. Don't become on the defensive and say, it's so boring, I can't stand this stuff. I just give up. So you attack it. Okay? The 4th one. I read it, I understand it, but it's just not sinking in deep enough. So in this case, what you have to do is elaborate. We remember stuff when it means something to us. So try to connect this new learning to some prior experience you've had either in life or in a class. I heard on the radio this morning 3/4 of people don't know how to change a tire anymore. Well, if you ever had to change a tire, you know how to change a tire, right? You taught it. Or if you're trying to learn how to ride a motorcycle, you learned how to ride a bike when you were a little kid, so take that prior knowledge and build up on it. They suggest that you chunk. I saw a presentation just now where they showed you 10 objects, and then you had to remember the 10 objects after they took the picture away. And I noticed I was chunking some of them by alphabetically, like these 3 all started with the letter C. These 3 were all things you could use in an art class. So I was taking the massive amount of organization and putting into chunks in my brain. Mnemonics. How about, what is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet? Roy B. Gibb. Do you know what that's a mnemonic for? What is that? Color of the rainbows, right? Isn't there something called My Dear Aunt Sally? And that's the... Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And that is the order of operations in math. And so develop some mnemonics to help you to remember. On piano, every good boy does fine. Yeah.
King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk.
What is that one?
King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk.
And what is that for?
Classifications of organisms and like
Oh, I didn't know that. King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk. Awesome. Well, I'm not a science major, obviously. So. Okay. You might say this to yourself, well, I guess I understand it. Do you really understand it if you're saying, I guess I understand it? Yeah. So don't guess about it. Test yourself. Who in here makes up their own test? Has anyone ever made up their own test? Did anyone ever have their mom or dad or cousin or brother study with them? You know, will you quiz me on this? So, okay. So don't develop what they call bystander apathy, meaning, I guess I understand it, and that's just where I'm going to leave it at. No, really get in there and master that subject. Okay, the next slide. There's just too much to remember. Sometimes I feel that way. So what you have to do here is figure out a way to organize it so that it makes sense in your brain. And some of the techniques that they suggest are write a chapter outline or a summary. Try to develop relationships between, if you're doing body systems, what's this system have in common with this system? How does this system depend on this system? Group information in categories, like I did this morning. These all started with a C. These all belonged in an art classroom. Again, you can map it, mind map it, or you can list it in an outline format, whatever works for you. This one. I knew it a minute ago, but now it's gone. It was there, and now it's gone. Do you ever feel that way? Okay. So after you read a section, immediately review that section and try to recall what it was that you just read. Go to the questions at the end of the section and try answering those. Let's see. The more time you spend studying, the easier it is to recall. Why is that?
Repetition.
Repetition, exactly, that's right. Those little neurons in your brain are just jumping all around and making new connections every time you review something that you've already looked at one time. Okay. But I like to study in bed. Anybody? Yeah? Yeah. That's you. And that might work for some of us, I don't know. But for me, that doesn't work because I tend to go ahead and fall asleep. So, this says context. Recall is better when we're studying in context. So the physical location you're in can actually make a mental connection to where you were actually at when that information was introduced. So the greater the similarity between the study session and the test session, the more likely you are to recall it on the test. So if you have an hour between classes, you might sit in that room if it's available and reread your notes while you're there. Because some of us may recall and some of us may reconstruct. So, gosh, I remember I was sitting in this chair and he was talking about this, and then I heard this person do this, and then he said, and it's like, oh yeah, okay. So you're reconstructing the day when the instructor was going over that information, and it helps you in your brain. Oh, here's a big no-no. Cramming before the test keeps it fresh in my mind. What's that do to you guys if you try to cram?
Where you at?
Confuses you, wears you out,
Stresses.
stresses you out. It's just like the more you try to cram in, the more you freak out. I remember doing that. So cramming is obviously the worst way to study at all. What you want to do is space your studying out over time. Study as you go along. She suggests begin with an hour or two a day before the class, increase the time as the exam approaches. But if you do the 5-day study method that we talked about, that would be really good. And then I'm just going to stay up all night long until I get this. What's wrong with that? Did anybody ever try that and oversleep and miss the test? I recall doing that once many years ago. And so staying up all night to study, first of all, cramming would not work. But your body needs rest, just like your car has to have gasoline. And if you let your car run out of gasoline, you're footing it, right? And so staying up all night to study is not good because what you'll be is mentally exhausted that next morning. Okay, I want to give credit for this. My good friend Michael Frizzell at MSSU in Springfield actually developed this, so I want to give him credit. He has a great website called The Absent Professor, and there are all kinds of information on there, just things like this that I would like to encourage you guys to go to The Absent Professor and look at. Questions, comments from this?
How did you come up with making your own tests? I'm really bad at that. I really would like to do it, but sometimes I'm just like.
Okay, so let's address the group with that. How do you make your own test? How would you decide what to put on there? Because you nodded a while ago. So how do you decide what to put on your tests?
Really with how I do it, it's with my Spanish class, primarily just because it stresses me out, like, wait, she understands, she said. But at the end of our books, they have like random, like in our grammar parts of the books, like it'll have like random questions. And at the end of the book, a lot of the time in multiple textbooks, they'll have like little questions, like the study questions, and then also we have assignments that we have to do. So I basically will write out sentences in Spanish, translate them, and then with that, if we're like learning tenses, I'll change like the verb tense and like figure out like what, change the tenses within it, and like change the sentence a little bit. So I'm getting that repetition and that practice.
What about if they don't have the answers in the back of the book? Because I have some, like, I'll do the problem, but then I'm just like, I don't know.
Is this like math? Or is it more like a, what?
No.
Do you have like a primary focus?
Like what type of class are you in that you want to make your study test?
I'm trying to think. Cause
A
like,
history class, a
I think it's
science
government
class?
actually.
Government class, okay.
Government.
Or chemistry.
What I would, since history is a pretty definite thing, you can't like, it's pretty definite. If it doesn't have the answers, that's kind of where that step 5 comes back into play, going through and reading the book and the chapter. So if you can't find the answers in the back of the book, it's definitely going to be in that chapter. So subtitles and like subtext within the chapter are your best friends. They'll definitely indicate where to look, so you don't have to like reread the chapter each time. But that will help, and then also with that, you're getting it in context too. So when you go back and read the chapter, you're not just getting the answer for the question, but you're also getting an answer in context. So it may, in the process, like answer other questions that you're thinking of. If that makes any sense at all.
Good. Yeah, another suggestion.
If you go on Quizlet and just type in your course, you can type in your course or like what chapter, and it gives you what other people have made questions.
Really?
And you can take practice tests on there that people have made. If you're not good at making your own questions, you can go on there and take a test over it with questions other people came up with. And then if you go through a few different people's tests, you've probably covered most of the material.
Because probably the same type questions keep
Yeah.
appearing on different
Yeah.
people's tests. And is that Quizlet, Quizlet? And you just can Google that and it'll bring you to that website?
And on there, whatever you choose, like take the test, you can choose multiple choice, fill in the blank. You can make it however you think your test is going to be.
Okay, good. All right, good suggestions. When I would make a test, I would partly use what the instructor had focused on, particularly if it was an area that I was struggling with and I just wasn't comprehending it very well. I love multiple choice. I hate true false. So I would put true false on my test, and there it's just like put the word not in there. And of course, when you're doing a true false, if it has those words like always, never, then that's probably not the correct answer, those type of concrete words. If it has a double negative in the true false, like it's never not a good idea, mark out never not, and it's basically saying it is a good idea, so take your double negatives out. But yeah, I think just the things that were the review questions at the back, but probably mostly I would go by what the instructor had talked about, particularly if it was something I just didn't understand, because what we know about research says that if you're writing it, it's sending nerve impulses up to your brain, whereas just reading it and saying it out loud doesn't necessarily do that, but writing it does. And so how many rewrite notes? Or, yeah, that's a really good way to get things into your long term too. So, okay, other comments or questions? All right, well, I really appreciate you guys coming. Thank you so much.